There we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Vito X Dino. It is our 18th episode. That means our show is now old enough to die for a country that doesn't care about it. Welcome, as always, to Dean Hansfield. Boy,
Wow.
I love starting
Wow.
heavy.
Jeez. Wait, what the next landmark is 21, right?
21, yeah, then it can drink.
Oh boy. I just got an alert from my live journal saying that it's 21 years old. My
Oof,
my that I have kept as my website all these years. If you type in deanhaspel.com, it bounces over to my live journal, man size.
that's
And it's
crazy.
21 now. So we're going to talk to this guy who just happened to be visiting this week and is in my studio. But rather than do the echo chamber thing between our two laptops, I put him out in the hallway.
It's lovely.
And everybody, this is James Greene from Jacksonville, Florida.
Heyo.
Did you
Good to
wear a
be
green
here.
shirt? Did you wear a green shirt just so people would know your last name?
Yep. And it's showing Fluke Fest from
Oh, cool.
Georgia. So
Nice.
representing the Southeast.
I love it. I love it.
Ah,
Well, James, tell people how we met, man, like, and who you are. What do you
Oh,
do?
gosh.
who you be with?
I've been so many things. Long ago, in I think it was 2012, I received word that Josh Neufeld dropped out of being a mentoring artist at Atlantic Center for the Arts in New Smyrna Beach, Florida, which is kind of central Florida coastal area. It's a really beautiful space on a maritime forest area where it's art studios and it's like a dorm, and you stay there for a month. It's really dreamy, and you have mentoring artists. And so Dean took Josh Neufeld's place, and that was when they extended the deadline, and that was why I applied. I wanted to work with Dean. After looking at the other cartoonists who were also great, it was Ellen Forney, you'll remember, and Megan Kelso, and
That's right.
wanted to work with Dean. And I didn't realize when we first started at that residency how super special it was, because all three mentoring artists were cartoonists, graphic novelists, comics artists. And that's never happened again. And I don't think it's ever going to happen at the ACA again. That meant that 30, around 30 cartoonists from around the world spent a month together in Florida, and they lived together. And during the week, we had a chef. Freaking awesome. And
Man,
so what we wanted to do was to work with all of them. We wanted to maximize our time with the connections we made there. And so Dean was my mentoring artist at ACA, and we had a really good crew in Dean's room. So good, in fact, that people from the other residencies would come and hang out in our studio because that was the fun room.
It was the fun room. Also, we worked 24/7 basically, like
Right.
the other master artists. And I respect and I get this, but had like curfew hours basically. Like they would do a couple hours a day, and that was the maximum. Like in other words, they said that you don't need to work all day, just a
No.
couple hours a day, meet with your students or whatever, or your associate artists. And but once you're in the trenches, that's what you're doing, man. You're just making comics, right? I think.
We
It's not
were
like I'm driving around Florida to go to a bar.
Well, you do a little bit of that. There's a strip club, a famous strip club in New Smyrna Beach called Bottoms Up, and it is the kind of strip club where if they see a large group comes in, then the gal behind the bar gets on the phone and just calls up like 4 or 5 local girls to come. And so it's one of those places, and they have a long history of having people from the ACA sneak off to go to Bottoms Up. But yeah, besides that, no, there's not a ton. There is an ocean, there's a beach.
I was just say there were two other things that I remember now because we've done this twice now together, 10 years apart.
That's right. We were getting to that, but go ahead.
We'll
Yeah,
get
we
to that
did.
in a second. But there's the beach, New Smyrna Beach itself, which we went to, is where I think the Daytona 500 first started on that beach.
hmm.
That's where
Yeah.
we're doing race driving, and then there was a bar nearby, that the reason why it draws you in is apparently that's the bar that the movie Monster.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Charlize Theron.
Yes.
Charlize Theron, that's right. she
And then
plays a serial killer or somebody. That's the
Aileen,
bar they busted her in.
Aileen
So they're like,
Wuornos.
Yeah.
yes. And it was like, come to the bar where she got busted and get a drink. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
sure, why not? You know.
What
But
a
also, I would
what,
go. Also, I go to Florida because my mom is about an hour away,
that's right.
and because they got me a car, I would go visit my mom on weekends and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So, but
You
that was
came and visited in 2013 or 14, and I picked you up in Jacksonville, and we rode down to
and got
Flavor Town.
Mexican food. That's
Mhm.
right.
Yeah, that was fun. But you have a Florida connection, so
Yeah. So, and we called our studio. It was Studio YOLO.
yeah, named after the worst word of 2012,
Yeah.
YOLO.
YOLO. But I use it to this day. So, oops, there it is. And then when we congregated 10 years later, so we're talking about 2012 and 2022 or 23? 23.
That was the first
And
one back after COVID. The first residency they did back after COVID was ours. So we were the guinea pigs, but it wasn't
right.
all. It wasn't all three mentoring artists being cartoonists. You were the only cartoonist.
Right.
We had a memoir group that I believe was all women, and then we had it was a composer, Judd Greenstein.
So right. And the memoir group was about trauma, right?
If it wasn't, it became about it because they had some hard lessons. They had some hard homework, let's say, at the ACA.
Yeah.
I remember that.
But
I remember them coming into our studio going like, I need a break. I need a fucking break from this.
Well, let me ask a question. It was very funny this week. I out of nowhere, I was looking up if the Zurich grant still existed, and it doesn't. And it just made me think, like, Dean, you'd done Yato, you'd done ACA, you've done a couple of these, and I'm just wondering, like, what are the resources involved in getting the word out there that these things exist? So that artists, like, let's say my daughter, who's 12, at some point she can probably go to one of these things and enhance her art. What are the resources that exist that make these things possible, and how do the students, or again, I'll call them students just for now until you correct me, James. But how students, how are they able to join and take part?
well,
Sure.
first of all, I've just as we've been talking about this, I kept thinking, wait, did Vito ever do a residency? I don't think you
No,
have, you know?
no.
And you've been in studios, so having a studio is kind of like a residency in a way because you're around other creators
Right.
and you talk to each other and maybe you have lunch or dinner or whatever and gripe, cry, laugh, whatever. Um, and I think residencies are just very concentrated, right? And it's almost like you're in the trenches together and you have this experience for better or for worse, you know? Often I have walked away from a residency feeling really good about it. A recent residency I did not love. And to the point where I was like, I would have had better time back at home in my studio, to be honest, you know? But it's hit or miss. But luckily we had two, I think, really good residencies at ACA. And yeah, I have gone to Yato about 6 times, and we'll see if I go again. I'm not sure. And they're always different, right? But in terms of resources, like I would say the majority of residencies, I think, are for writers. I mean, there's a lot of the other side is artists, you know, like painters or sculptors, or not as many cartoonists, but cartoonists are showing up more and more in these residencies because we're undeniable, right? But and then there's like cinema and dance and some theater and that kind of stuff. So it sprinkles all over the place. Some of them you can go there as long as you get yourself there. They will house you and feed you. There are a lot of residencies. I would say the majority where you pay to play, as it were. You know, I haven't looked into a lot of them, but honestly, you just type in residencies, and there's McDowell, there's Yato, then there's the kind of thing the ACA used to do. I don't know if ACA is still going to do that moving forward. James, you got any word on that?
So ACA, since I think it's the early 80s or like 1980, has hosted, I think it was 3 or 4 residencies a year. And then for a while it was 3. Now I believe they're switching it up. They do have a new executive director, and they are doing more, at least this year. If you go to their website, Atlantic Center for the Arts, and you look at residencies on there, the tab for residencies, It tells you that they're not doing the long residencies this year. Um, they're doing shorter things. They're doing long weekends. They're doing day things, and they're doing special residencies. So an example would be they did a residency for surf filmmakers, people who make surfing films. And then that was like a special thing that where people came from all over, and it wasn't an open call. I know that what they do for mentoring artists is they reach out to you. Typically, they reach out to the mentoring artist. When it comes to residencies, and by the way, when you go to a residency at ACA, you're called an associate. You're not really a student, you're called an associate, but
Thank you.
I think they used to refer to the mentoring artists as master artists, and I don't think they use that term anymore. They use mentoring artists. So
I think they should bring that back.
When we went,
Of course.
all of the room and board was covered by the Andy Warhol Foundation for Visual Artists. And so after the experience, we wrote thank you letters to that foundation.
Is it since they're narrowing it down and like maybe doing shorter residencies, like you mentioned day residencies, long weekends. Do you think, as someone who's done this at least more than once that I know of, do you think that helps or hurts the associates?
I'm, you know, I don't want to comment too much about ACA's business, but their residency is one of a kind. And being there for several weeks, being there for like 3 or 4 weeks. I remember the one in 2012 was 4 weeks. The one in 2023 was 3 weeks. And you need that amount of time, really, to get to a comfortable place with your fellow associates and your mentoring artists, and to maybe reassess the thing that you thought you were going to do when you went there. Maybe you went there with an idea, and then after meeting your peers, after getting some food for thought by looking at other people's work, you might be influenced, and you might be like, you know what, I've got a whole other thing I might want to do, or something just occurred to me tonight. And so you need a longer kind of runway, I think, for these creative things. And so that could be hampered by a shorter residency.
Sure.
But they are branching out more into the community, and they're offering more for kids, teens, and families. And honestly, like, if you're a kid who doesn't otherwise have access to fine arts and resources like that, that's fantastic if you can get in there and do that. So they're expanding their reach while sort of right now anyway, minimizing the long residencies. I love the long residency. I thought it was dreamy. It was amazing. And so, yeah.
They're harder to do. They're harder to do, Vito, because you're taking 3 or 4 weeks off of your quote life
right.
to indulge something that's obviously super important to your life. It's just that it's the ability to be able to pull that off, which is why sometimes you get like an Andy Warhol Foundation to, throw some money your way to get you there. But you still have to arrange things at home, like I have 2 cats, like, or whatever, or you might be stopping your job for a little while to do that. When we had, Russ Kazmierzak was at the second residency. Mm-hmm. So we had Studio YOLO, which we just called her name YOLO 12 years ago. And then the most recent one, was it you, James, or maybe it was Russ or somebody called it Studio FOMO?
I think it was you, and you attributed it to me. But FOMO, yeah. FOMO, it's a cousin of YOLO.
There you go. And also, when I get a room there or a cabin,
you get a whole house. ACA, yeah.
I get a house. And what's really cool about the house is that the amount of other artists that have been there to teach, like Edward Albee, all kinds of folks, and they all write their name in the closet where you hang your clothes. So there's like all these signatures over the years. And the house I got, the most recent one, Bob Ross.
Fuck yeah.
I was like, oh my God. Bob Ross. I was in Bob Ross's bed.
Did you sign the wall?
Oh yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, I was gonna say.
Yeah, of course. But it was just so cool to see the different names. Craig Thompson has taught there, Paul Pope. You said Megan Kelso, Ellen Forney, and I'm thinking there's another person.
Oh yeah. No, she Phoebe Glockner.
Phoebe Glockner was there.
That was
So
during
they've had,
COVID.
yeah. So they've had a bunch of good cartoonists, but I want to take that model and somehow reframe it, like maybe in the Catskills here in upstate New York or something. Like I think trying to live and do a 3 week anything in Manhattan or Brooklyn would be so expensive. It would be insanity. But maybe you find like some mansion, old busted mansion, that somebody has kind of renovated, that has rooms and spaces to work at. There's a residency in France that a lot of people are going to right now because this guy renovated his mansion, and they have goats and a little stream, and it's cool. A lot of people are going to that. So I mean, Vito, is that something you've ever wanted to entertain, is going to a residency?
I don't know. I mean, the appeal is out obviously there. I think like for me, it comes across as almost like summer stock. You know what I mean? Like in the theater and like in the performing arts, uh, they would always try to get you to do summer stock just to keep your skills sharp or something like that. And that was way back in high school, so I don't know that like I've ever looked into anything like that since. And it's funny, like I mentioned Zurich Grant, which is not anything like this, but I had always like talked myself out of doing stuff like the Zurich Grant or maybe even like residencies only because well now I'm married and I have kids, so it's a lot harder. But the thing that I always talked myself out of was, am I deserving of that kind of, not imposter syndrome per se, but like, am I deserving of that kind of focus and attention um, to do something like that?
The first thing I experience whenever I go to a residency, whether I'm the master artist, associate artist, just showing up as you know, a, a thug with a velvet mind, uh, is imposter syndrome. The first
Yeah.
day or two is like, how could I? Why am I? But then I think everyone else who's worth their salt is probably feeling the same way, like because there's a sense of elevation, but then that quickly disperses, and you're humanized pretty quickly. Even the ones who are famous at the residency, they're people too. That's what ultimately happens. So what you start to do, and this is what I've experienced, you start to wonder, well, what then I need to use the time here proactively.
Mhm.
I can't just vacation and chill out. You can, a lot of residencies, they're not telling you what to do. They're not like checking your homework or anything. So and it kind of galvanizes you to say, wait a second, I need to really, you know, rock this place. And you will come in with a project that you may abandon within 3 days because you've had conversations now with other smart people or different kinds of thought, and you realize, oh, this is not what I should be doing at all. And
Mhm.
then it sparks something else. That
Right.
happens all the time.
Do you ever think that, like in the back of your head, that you have people back, let's say back home, but like people that are kind of counting on you to kind of use time wisely, finish what you started, that kind of, you ever have that kind of mentality when you go in?
James, you answer that first.
I haven't not the people at home. They trust me to take care of my work. I have it. I came with the intention to continue a really long running comic, or a comic that I had. It's not long running. It was one I was taking way too long on. To finish that in the first residency, and when I got to meet Dean and sort of see about how other people went about their process, I scrapped that idea and did a completely original 24-page comic that became a comic book that I published independently called Meet the Neighbors in 2013. And that came completely out of the residency experience because I was the only person who was headquartered who lived in Florida
Mm.
in that residency. Everybody
You were
else was
close.
coming. Everybody was coming from outside, and I came from not that far and had a car and everything. And so I got to sort of. It was great. It was great to see people's responses, in a sense, to Florida, and that got me thinking about ideas for a comic that ultimately was about gigantic cockroaches. That it was a very, very much a Florida tale. And
Didn't you do a
so,
comic about two guys stealing copper wiring out of people's homes?
yes, it was in response to the real estate bubble bursting. We were still sort of in that downturn in 2012. It was looking up a little bit, but it was still fresh. The real estate downturn of '07, '08. And what was happening, especially in Florida, was they had built all these neighborhoods during the bubble getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then suddenly you had all these out of work construction workers who couldn't find other work in the state, and they felt trapped because they couldn't move. And so some of them might have turned to crime. And so they became destruction workers, stealing things from foreclosed homes like air conditioning coils or the copper house wiring in these kind of slapped together houses.
Right.
And
So,
so
Vito,
that was what they were doing in the comic.
So Vito, I'm the mentoring artist, and there's this room full of other cartoonists, and like everyone has a different project they want to do. And like James is talking about this kind of stuff. I'm like, I have no expertise in this stuff, but I can maybe help figure out your story or how to bring clarity to your story if there's any stumbling blocks. And also I provided some exercises. We had some good exercises.
Yeah, we did.
And do you have one with you or not?
I do. Actually, I have yours. This appeared in Dean Haspel's Psychotronic Comics, and it's A Letter Lasts Longer. And this is yours, but I also have, it originally appeared in Breakers, which is look at how much material is in this. All of this was created at the first ACA cartoonist residency. And of course, Dean's got a classic in here, but we all did this, A Letter Lasts Longer, where Dean gave us a script and then we worked out a one-page comic. Hard to do. A one-page comic is a trick.
I've done it. I'm sorry. I'm laughing at the butthole.
Okay, and that's why I brought this, because I want Dean to sign Starfish Chastity for me, because this is absolutely. I watched him draw this, and this is in one day, 1 or 2 days, and this right here is the master touching the top of the mountain right here. I'm not kidding. One of the associates that we had with us after watching Dean draw this, he just quit comics. Just quit it. I'm done. And this was all in relation to a character that we devised at the residency called Shifty Goth. But that's a whole other podcast, I'm afraid.
Oh my God. It's a whole podcast on its own, right? And actually, my studio mate, Whitney, is here. And if she could hop on for a second. Could you come over here, Whitney? Because James, so the second one we did, instead of me writing the short story.
Oh, right. Wow.
Whitney wrote it and had like 6 or 7 interpretations or whatever.
I wasn't listening, so.
Oh, sorry.
So she did the same thing. She wrote a.
Which about ACA? You wrote a short story that everyone drew.
Oh yeah.
Yes,
I did.
And James did this epic version of your story.
Oh my God, it was.
And I don't have it with me. It's never been published in anything, but it's a 2-page spread. And it's a lot of architecture and water and characters and everything. And I loved doing it. It was kind of like I needed a tutorial for how to figure out digital inking and coloring, and that was it. And so I included that in a portfolio for a grant. And I swear they took one look at that and said, "Give him the money." And so that tells you that's a receipt right there. That's a bona fide. But it was Whitney's, very open to interpretation script that she provided.
What was it called? Do you remember?
Thriving.
I need to show it to the inspiration for.
And I'm sure I must have posted all the examples somewhere, somehow.
Probably on Instagram.
Usually I do that kind of stuff.
Well, I'll repost it on my Instagram, Jack's Comics Core.
Cool. Well, actually, so maybe we can thank you, Whitney. Thank you.
Thank you.
So maybe we can get into because Vito, who's the Zero Grant is no longer, but who is it Koyama Press? What's her name? Is giving out $1,000 grants these days to cartoonists? I
don't remember. I think it's Koyama.
Koyama Press, which no longer publishes, but the woman whose name is escaping me, sorry, maybe somebody can go on the internet real quick but she is granting $1,000 grants to cartoonists that deserve it, as it were,
Right.
you know. And I mean, obviously, that's really cool and helpful. But didn't so? What's DCAS is not a grant or a residency. It's an actual kind of like a small press expo type thing, right?
Correct.
Because I'm bearing the lead. James you work at a library.
That's true. That's my day job, mild-mannered librarian.
He's a mild-mannered librarian.
So, by the way, it's Annie Koyama, I believe.
Yeah.
And
Koyama
it's
provides.
at Koyama Provides on Instagram.
Got it.
They just gave a $1,500 grant to Hana Sung. So there you go.
Congratulations. Thanks for looking that up.
Yeah.
So DCAS and being a librarian.
Right. Well, my background is in art education, and I got out of teaching in Florida classrooms in 2019. No looking back, and I got into an interesting position in the Jacksonville Public Library, basically doing art programming for the extensive galleries that are inside that library. It's the largest public library building in the state of Florida. And so then COVID happened. I wasn't planning on staying in the job for a long time, but then COVID happened and I retained that job. We were closed, and when we returned, had a job. And once we started back doing public events again, and art events were kind of why I started there, they wanted ideas, and I had one all ready to go because we planned a fest that was canceled by COVID, and it was called DCAZ Fest. DCAZ, that stands for Duval Comics and Zines. Now, Duval is the name of the county that Jacksonville is in, but Jacksonville and Duval County are the same thing. The borders of Jacksonville and the borders of Duval County are the same because in 1967, their city and county government condensed into one. It combined into one. And so that makes Jacksonville this extremely huge city, 840 square miles.
Wow.
That's how big this city is. And so, yes, it's very sprawling, and there are great pockets and neighborhoods within it. And there's a great comics and zines scene happening in Duval. It already had this kind of weirdo culture. And it came together when we finally did DCAZ Fest in the fall of 2022. And when it finally happened, it exceeded expectations. We had a lit chat guest that year. It was Jim Rugg, who had a fantastic conversation. You can find his interview on the Shortbox podcast with Botter Milligan. They have a fantastic conversation. This was in the fall of 22. And then we've since done it every year. And so in the 2023 DCAZ Fest, we had Leela Corman come in as our lit chat guest. And then most recently in the spring of 2024, we had Nate Powell come in as our special guest. And so, but in addition to the special guest, we had 74 tablers at last year's fest, and we drew 2,100 people in one afternoon to a post-COVID library event in Jacksonville. And so that was really validating. We have tablers that come from around the Southeast, certainly Savannah, Georgia, is a place where people come down from. Athens, Georgia is another sort of hub for that kind of Southern fried weirdo culture. And there's a lot of excitement built for 2025 DCAZ Fest, which will happen on June the 21st at the Jacksonville Public Library, main library downtown. Our special guest is Osa Otto, who comes from the world of zines. So we've had these comics people for the last 3 years, and this year we want to do something different and have a guest who comes from the world of zines, strictly. And so Osa Otto did a Shotgun Seamstress zine for many years, and they've moved on to other kinds of art and advocacy, but there's a real streak of activism in what they do too. So hopefully some fireworks will result in that, because we are in Florida. We're in kind of a conservative city in Florida, and like that's synonymous with crackdowns on things like school libraries and books and other drag queens and other things like that. And DCAZ, I'm so proud of it. It is the queerest event you're going to find in downtown Jacksonville, hands down.
That's awesome.
And it's right out there in front of God and everybody, in the face of Governor DeSantis. So
What's the website for it so we can get it out ahead of time?
sure, it's dkazfest.com.
Right.
And applications for this year's fest closed a couple days ago, but like I said, it will be on June the 21st. And we do lead up activities, and we also keep monthly activities happening. Every first Wednesday, we do a Zinester meetup. And then bi-weekly on Saturdays, we do a cartoonist support group, if you will. It's called Saturday Morning Cartooning, and it is a place where people who are working on comics can come and not just network, they can put their penciled work, for instance, in front of other people to do kind of like what Dean and I were doing at the residency, where he and I sat down with roughed pages and a script, and he gave his, he followed along and gave his critique as we went, because it's good to get critique before you finish the comic, before you get out there in front of everybody, because a lot of youngsters, a lot of younger cartoonists, they work in isolation, unfortunately.
Yeah. And thumbnails is where it all happens. It all happens in the thumbnails. Everything else is execution after that, right?
That is the sort of basis for how I show people how to do it, Dean. So you've transferred that sort of philosophy to me, and I am, I definitely borrow from that, because I agree, the layout is where it's at.
James, you're in Brooklyn for Bix, is that correct?
No, I wish.
Okay.
I wish. I'm on a trip right now with my girlfriend, who is here for a conference in Manhattan, and I'm her +1. But this was a sentimental journey to meet up with Dean, but also to hit up some of Brooklyn's finest comic shops and put my newest comic, which just came out last month. Well, now it's 2 months ago now. And put that in their shop. So I'm getting.
Do you have a copy of it on you? Like,
It's called The Windlords of Iowa.
There it is.
State of Iowa, but
it's great. And I want you to talk about that comic before you do. Today, check that out. Today he went to Desert Island and St. Mark's Comics, so like Williamsburg and the Industry City in Brooklyn. And I think tomorrow you're going to hit up Forbidden Planet in Manhattan.
Indeed. So this has been like a whirlwind quick trip. That's always how it is when I make it to New York, it seems. But today was fun. Weather agreed, trains agreed, and made it here with no problem. But it's been really fun to share this, and I'm super stoked that this is in stores now here in New York City.
And explain the concept and what you're working on here, which I think is fascinating.
Sure. So this is the first part of a 4-part story. The second part is already laid out and it's on my board at home.
Before we leave the listeners of the podcast instead of the viewers of the podcast out of it, it is what would you call that, monocolored, monotone colored, but so it was mostly in yellows from what I can see, yellows and blacks, which, if you ask me, that's the thing you probably learned the most from Dean.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's a Dean Haskell staple.
For sure. So
limited palette, limited color palette.
Limited color palette, absolutely. So we printed this on goldenrod paper, and we used a risograph, one color risograph duplicator, and we used the color called Federal Blue. And so Federal Blue is used on the cover and on the inside. And I love it. It neutralizes. When the blue hits that goldenrod colored paper, it doesn't look blue. It looks, it looks like a great grayscale. And so there's a lot of push and pull with the warm and cool color.
I like it.
Yeah.
And talk about the concept.
Sure. So the comic, I put out in 2022, I put out a mini comic called Larry Lothman Snake Master. And how this came out was I was basically sitting with a friend, and we kind of dared each other to put out a 24-pager that year. And we're like, okay, fine, I'm doing it. All right, then, I'm fucking doing it. And so we did it, and this was the result for me, was Larry Lothman Snake Master. And immediately upon finishing it and getting it out there into the world, I sat down with another idea. This was an idea about basically the people who denied science during COVID and also rushed to Florida where there were no COVID rules, quote unquote, no rules. And that's where the script started to grow. I penciled out about 28 pages and sat down with Dean at the second residency, at the residency in 2023, and we went through panel to panel. So the concept is about a family during COVID, and the family is kind of torn apart by extreme conspiracy thinking. It's not about a specific conspiracy, but it's about conspiracism and how it's been going on for a long time, but it seemed like in 2020 during COVID, there was a break.
Sure.
Where the wall between fiction and reality just seemed so very fragile, where the Democrats were drinking baby's blood and COVID was all an op. And suddenly everyone became, these folks anyway, became experts in virology overnight. And of course that was going to happen, but few push it as to extreme lengths as the couple in this story. And so of course they moved to Florida, and that's where the real shit happens.
All right. I love it because you're telling a story about two people I would otherwise never want to read or know, and yet I'm fascinated because I already know people like me. I don't know people like that. So are you basing this not only on the news, but anybody you do know that's kind of thinks that way or behave that way? Or
that is a good question, because I mean, obviously I live in Florida, and so I'm surrounded. There's a tremendous variety of folks down there, but obviously they're not all like me. I believe in science. I wore a mask. I don't believe that COVID was an op by a blood drinking cabal. But if you your neighbors, and certainly I draw a lot from my neighbors. In fact, it was Dean who pointed out to me when I was making the cockroach comic back in 2013. He was like, "Your thing is about you're about being a good neighbor, aren't you? Like you're about like even if you disagree with the people, being kind to them." And I didn't know that until he said that. I was like, "Yeah, I guess I am." And so I'm obviously really influenced by the folks who surround me on my street, and they're not like me. They're lovely folks, but they're not like me. It all kind of stemmed from a very sad birthday party that I went to during COVID. So this was like in the summer of COVID, and it was in August, and we were all still kind of locked down, and we were invited to a kid's birthday party at a bowling alley of all places. Talk about a COVID nightmare, right? But they were open, and every place was trying to, get business and stuff because it was so hurt by the pandemic. And so we went, and we tried to enjoy ourselves. And it was like, do I wear a mask around you all? Do I wear a mask when I'm out next to people I don't know? They put us, after we bowled, they put us in a room where we had cake and pizza and stuff. And then we took off our masks and, could kind of chat. And they asked me, "James, how are your folks doing?" My parents live in Iowa. I'm originally from the state of Iowa. It's been a long time since I've lived there, but they asked me about that. They said, "James, how are your folks doing?" And I told them, "Well, they just had a derecho." And they're like, "A what?" I said, they had a derecho, and it was the most historic storm they've had in a long time. This was during COVID summer. It was August 8th of 2020. The most powerful thunderstorm ever recorded in America happened in Iowa. Now, there aren't a lot of folks that live out there, but the folks who do live out there, especially in the city of Cedar Rapids, were hit so hard by this derecho, which is the name they give. Essentially, it's like a land hurricane, only the winds go one direction, straight line winds. They said something like 1 million acres of corn was knocked down by the winds. Infrastructure, nothing up there is hurricane wind force rated. And so my hometown, which used to be a very leafy green city, lost about 65% of its tree cover. Like it looked like a logging town afterwards. And my parents, who were in their mid-70s, were without power for almost 2 weeks. It was a shit show in Iowa, and nobody outside of there knew that it happened. Because it was George Floyd summer, it was COVID summer, there was all this other shit happening, taking people's attention. And so I told him, I said, yeah, my folks just had a derecho. And my neighbor, going back to the birthday party, my neighbor was like, in 1 second, he had an explanation. He was like, that's because they turned on all the wind turbines, the prairie wind turbines. They turned them all on, don't you know? To cause all that damage, to cause billions of dollars of damage and destroy Iowans' lives. Don't you know? And so that was where I realized that I am not on the same page as these folks, and I'm sitting there having cake with them. And that was where the genesis of Windlords came from.
And you plan this to be a 4-part story, right? You've just done the first part.
The first part called Toll Road. The first story is called Toll Road, and it refers to the toll, not a real toll strictly, although Florida has a lot of those, but the toll that it takes to live in Florida. You see, there's a trade. There's a trade to living in the land of complete freedom. And that's what the characters learn in the comic. That's why you want to read the comic to find out about that toll. But the second one is called Lizard Brains, and I'm drawing it right
now. It's so great. And I know I gave you a quote for the back, but who's the author I compared you to? And you introduced me to this author.
Oh my God, this was the biggest compliment ever. Dean said, if George Saunders wrote a graphic novel, it might well look and read like this.
Yeah,
that made my whole life, Dean.
Vito, are you familiar with George Saunders at all?
Weirdly enough, I think there's another George Saunders that I'm thinking of that played Mr. Freeze on the Batman TV show before Otto Preminger.
No, that was it was Otto Preminger and another, oh, what's his name? And I feel like I've met both of them.
You met Otto Preminger? I don't know why I'm surprised, but you met Otto Preminger?
I either met Otto Preminger or the guy, but one of them taught me how to swim.
Huh.
This guy who I think played a Mr. Freeze with my godmother Shelley Winters, where the people taught me how to swim in a swimming pool at a hotel. Otto Preminger, but it's not Otto. It's like I think he's a direct. Wait, Otto Preminger is a director.
George Sanders.
George Sanders is someone else.
I'm thinking of.
Yeah,
and Eli Wallach also played Mr. Freeze.
Oh, that's right. So many guys. So George Saunders. So James.
Yes.
Vito needs to read this story. It's a short story that you made me read first.
Oh my God.
What's it called?
And it's called Isabel.
Called Isabel.
Okay.
Do yourself a favor. Read Isabel.
Writing down.
Yeah, it's in the book called Civil War Land in Bad Decline.
All right.
And that's short works by George Saunders. He did a lot of writing in the New Yorker, and then he did Lincoln in the Bardo, the novel called Lincoln in the Bardo, and then his newest one is called Liberation Day, and that one, oh my goodness, that one, the title story in there will hit you. And
Vito,
I keep thinking about it.
Vito, there are certain similarities between you and James because James really gets into the nitty gritty about people and neighborhood and society. And I know you lean that way much more than I do in your stories. In fact, when I was so impressed with what you came up with for Purple Heart, because we were talking about gangs and trying to fuse these people together or not, and trying to elect a president in a new Brooklyn and all this stuff, right? And I just feel like you and James could come up with a really good collaboration at some point.
I would love to. Like, the thing that you're referring to is just like letting character dictate the story as opposed to letting the story dictate how the characters react and act. I think that the thing is, like, we're doing this kind of pseudo experiment on the show with Oathbound, which is just a superhero concept that I came up with, that Dean and a couple other artists are contributing to. And I just gave them like the bare bones idea of a story, and I'm starting to put the story together now. But the thing is, like I was just saying, like I usually let the characters dictate how the story goes, and the thing that everyone bounces back with, except for like the one or two writers that I've done this with in this project, is that they want to know the story before they know what the character is. For like Dean and I think even Matt Major had a little bit of difficulty with it as well. But the thing, like, I'm looking to see what you think the character is, so that way we can say what the story is as a result of who these people are. And I think, just over, looking over my work, um, the characters usually come out fully formed in my head, and I usually hear their dialogue. And I'll write. I used to write like this, but I don't write like it anymore. I've changed a little bit of how I script stories, but I'll usually what I used to do is I used to write all the dialogue. Then I would go through and go, all right, that's a page. All right, that's a page, and then go through again and go, okay, that's a panel. That's a panel. So the thing that I was really, kind of stressing, or maybe like, the thing that I found in my work that was so crucial was how people, not so much like in a David Mamet or even a Woody Allen, like how dialogue dictates action, but just like the dialogue will tell you who that person is. So once you see, once you hear how they speak, they then will show you what they look like. They'll tell you where they live. They'll tell you, what the outside influence of their environment means to them, and how that, and that good.
Well, I was gonna say a couple things. So real quick on the David Mamet thing, because you just reminded me, you talk about behavior through character. Like, I think it's David Mamet that said, by the way a character says hello when they enter a room or talk to a person, you already know their relationship between the two people.
Wow.
By how they say hello. It's either hello or hello, or like whatever. You're like, you can do all kinds of hellos, right? And it should tell you a little bit about the relationship just in saying hello. But the thing about this Oathbound thing, which is hard to crack for me, is I could come up with a ton of characters, right?
Right.
But like most teams start off with some kind of an agenda or something. And that's why those characters are in that story, either to be conflictual, to add something that's missing from another character, that this other person ultimately is going to be the one that once they all get together, they're the reason why the story exists, kind of thing.
Well, the other thing too, I think, Dean, is that, as a creator, like as the creator that you are, is you have the story in mind. And because I can't necessarily draw, I have to figure out what the character is before I get to the story, because you can sit down on a piece of James, I assume you can do the same thing. You can sit down at a blank piece of paper and say, okay, this is what you will see the layout, and then you'll see how, like the backgrounds, and you'll see the characters. I see the character first because I have to get their voice, and I have to hand that to somebody else to do what you do.
But it's funny, I often have to, in order to find my character, I have to put them in a situation and find out what they're going to do, give them a conflict. And then you start to learn your character, whatever that is.
Oh,
and whatever you're trying to do.
And that's so fun. I started doing that with Larry Lothman. The character Larry Lothman, which is the title character for 2 mini comics that came out before Windlords, is where I learned to do that. To write a character so well, so that you know them so well that you know exactly how they're going to respond in any situation. You know what they're going to say. Things that are in their biography that affect them to have a certain attitude or respond a certain way. And so it was in writing one character, this curmudgeonly kind of character of Larry Lothman, that I learned to write a sort of character-driven dramedy. That's what Windlords is.
I just saw last night, it hasn't come out yet, I think it comes out May 2nd, tomorrow, is the Thunderbolts movie, right?
Oh, it's all over Times Square.
Yeah, understand something, Dean. I skipped going to see it this afternoon because of this.
Oh. No.
Yeah, I could have went to an early screen.
This wasn't worth it. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, sorry.
Anyway, you were saying, Dean.
It's so good. It's so good. And it definitely, besides it being a really good story and a lot of fun, and I love it, All the stuff we're talking about, constructing a story through character,
Mhm.
it's great for that. It like these characters literally, and I don't want to give too much away, but just don't belong together at first. Let's just put it that way.
Mhm.
And even do they even belong together at the end? I'm not so sure, but they go through a journey together, and those are the best kinds of stories. So in some ways, it's doing what you want it to do or what you expect it to do. But it was just so much fun, and you'll see why. And actually, I got emotional watching this movie twice. So I recommend it highly, and it was a lot of fun. And Annie Nocenti, awesome writer, legendary Marvel Comics editor. Daredevil, Longshot, X-Men. I was her plus one. And this really cool thing happened. Nick Lowe, the editor, I think he's an X-Men editor
Yeah,
of
I
Marvel.
think he moved to Avengers and switched with
Right.
Tom Brevoort, who's over at X-Men now.
Right. So
I
he
know
was
Nick.
he jumped up in front of the packed audience, full of cartoonists and fans and stuff, and friends and family call it. And he started pointing out names like so and so's here who created that character, and so and so's here. And then he's like, and Dean Haspel's here, and everyone applauded. I was like, what is going on right now? Like, it was so cool to be considered to be a part of, like, Marvel history in some
Right.
way.
Well, what's
And
funny
anyway.
is there's an article that's going around about Sentry, the character Sentry, and how Rick Veitch helped Paul Jenkins create the character, but he doesn't get credited for it.
Oh, interesting.
So, like, if you get a chance, I mean, it's not worth hashing out over this, but it was on Bleeding Cool and I think Popverse, maybe even
Oh,
Newsarama.
interesting.
So
Right. And actually, now that you say that, it totally makes sense that Rick Beach, because it's not exactly how I would have written the movie, but let's just put it this way. It's very much my kind of movie. Like, I feel like, especially with the conflict and some of the resolution, is definitely, I was in that writer's room somehow. Let's just put it that way.
maybe that's why you got
So,
thanked.
no, I just got thanked from being in the audience, being a fan. But it was really cool. So I know we got to wrap this up pretty soon, but James, I'm just throwing this in your lap right now. We sometimes like to do hot topics or ask a question that we all try to answer. Do you have any kind of weird question, or maybe something about craft and comics craft or something? Or
Well, something that's been on my mind as we put together these events, and we're trying in Jacksonville, and we're trying to activate, like we said, this younger generation that might have gone to college or come of age during coronavirus, when arts community spaces were shuttered. They were like never really initiated into like the arts and culture community, and there's been like this generational leap, I feel like, where 2+ years of socially isolating and avoiding groups has made a difference in what people want to do with their time. And I don't know if you've noticed that or have seen interesting ways where the sort of younger generation are being activated to do things together again, to spend time together again, to come together into these pockets, as it were. I don't know whether that's a question, but that's definitely something that's been on my mind lately.
I mean, my gut reaction is I do think there seems to be two or three comic shows every weekend now.
Right.
So that definitely answers your people craving to be around each other, right? Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do with our comics is make human connections.
Mhm.
Whatever the kind of comic we're writing or drawing is up to debate, whether it's a genre-oriented thing or something political or whatever. But I do think people who make comics seem to be more interested in, you're saying, use the word activate. I was thinking activism.
Mm.
I think there's more trying to rally. And sometimes you think, oh, that's going to be a boring comic to read. I don't want to read about telling me how to live or what's right, or let's point a finger at a bad guy and just be like, don't do that. And but I also think that is how maybe the youngsters are responding to. Villains aren't necessarily Thanos anymore, or Magneto, or a complicated character like Magneto. Maybe they are the bully. Maybe they are our leaders, more than ever before, and we're trying to buck that system. What do you think, Vito?
Well, I was thinking about the movie Minecraft that just came out
Mm.
and how it's, I mean, never mind how it's doing, in terms of money, it's doing well. But the idea that these kids are going to a movie and having their own Rocky Horror Picture Show moment with throwing popcorn and stuff. And then I looked this week and it seems that like a 32-second song that Jack Black sings in the movie is on the Billboard Top 100. Like, how does that happen?
That's the second time he did that. Didn't they do it in the Mario movie as well? And it
Well, he
like
was. Oh, that's right. But he actually did a whole song.
the whole song though, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, like it's just kind of like I'm not saying that kids are having a moment or that culture is starting to veer towards kids and the things that they like. I think that was always the case, but it's now. It seems like now they're more. They recognize where it is and they can find it a little bit. I don't want to say easier, but they can find it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe COVID. I would say probably killed the home video buying market because everyone went to streaming. Um, but at the same time, I work at Target, for my day job. My Target at least, doesn't carry DVDs, but we carry albums, we carry vinyl.
Weird.
And so people will come in and go, "Do you guys have CDs?" And it's like, no, because most people listen to music on their phone. And like, I'm dealing with like older people, that probably don't know how to use their phone to do that. So it's just it's weird how like the culture's shifting in a certain way, one way, and getting kids to gather for these things like the Mario movie, like Minecraft, playing into their video. I think Five Nights at Freddy's was another one.
Mm-hmm.
That, like, these are video games that are now becoming movies. These movies aren't anything of any real substance per se, but it's becoming this thing where it's like appointment, for these kids. Like, did you see it yet? Did you see it yet? To the point that like my son had a sleepover one day. One of his friends came over and stayed the weekend, and I said to my wife, like, why don't you take them both to see Minecraft because Jerry, my son's friend, didn't see it yet. So it was like, yeah, like let's get this kid in on the pop culture thing that's happening right now, and we value stuff like, art and culture and stuff like that anyway. So
Sure, it's a family value in your place.
yeah.
Yeah, what I've noticed is that because we do these like zine nights and maker nights and things like that, and get-togethers, a lot of open mics. Kids are, and when I say kids, I'm meaning more like teens and people in their 20s, maybe more Gen Zers. They are into open mics, at least in Jacksonville. Open mics, stand-up storytelling,
Interesting.
and we sold out a comic book read aloud, a comics read aloud, where it's projected on the screen and the cartoonist reads it. And we've got these kind of looser, more relaxed, sort of freewheeling scene driven by these arty activities, and it's very hands-on. And over the years, at least in Jacksonville, that has the scene has kind of become more diverse. We've got this kind of wave of newer venues that are really informal, and these kind of informal recurring events built around this really broad approach to creation and hands-on. And I feel like zines especially are plugging into that. That's one thing I'm noticing.
I think you're right. And stand-up comedy is all over the place. Everyone and their mom is a comedian now. There's so much storytelling, like you said. And I think that's the experience thing that they're craving for. Like they have their phone, they have the go to an experience, and we're still looking at old comic books and vinyl records and that physical thing, right? But Vito, it just occurred to me because we do like 4 of these a month. Maybe one of our podcasts should be reading a short story each and make it part of our experience here. People can come on, listen to you tell a short story, and then me tell a story, and maybe have a guest, 3 short stories. Yeah. And that's one podcast. Why not? That's something to think about,
Sure.
Because we don't always have hot topics and guests and, or whatever. It's just something to think about while talking live here. So
Right.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Was there anything else that you wanted to share with us, James, about your comics or anything coming up?
Yeah, find Windlords of Iowa, Book One, Toll Road at Desert Island Comics and at St. Mark's Comics. And also, you can find it at all of the fine indie bookstores in Jacksonville, Florida.
That's right.
Big plug.
Excellent.
Do
And
you
how
have
do
a
they find
website that
you?
anybody can buy it on, or?
You can yes, you can order it from papercitypublishing.com.
That's what we're looking for.
Yep, papercitypublishing.com, and you can follow me on social media at Jack's Comics Core, and that's comics with an X.
Excellent. Vito,
Yes.
anything on your end? You're good?
Well,
You still got that rabbit?
The rabbit's right here eating a dandelion as we speak. The outdoor pen is just about completed, so he'll be going back outside shortly.
Excellent.
But I did have a topic that I wanted to throw at you guys.
Okay.
It's a little, I don't want to say it's heady, but it's kind of like, all right, well, let's see, what people think. So today on Substack, I posted a note about I used Walter Simonson and Joe Staten as examples, but you can use anybody. And it was just basically like, do you think they're proud of us in that we're carrying comics in a traditional, like in the way that we're doing, maybe not the traditional method of drawing them or making them, but we're still like comics are still a valid thing that, still exists. Like, so do you think like legends are happy to be a part of the comic book industry that we are currently making?
Uh, I actually have a response from Walt Simonson about that I'm trying to look up as I'm talking to you right now. What do you feel, James, while I look for this?
There are so many independently produced comics out there. There are so many folks who want to get into doing doing the graphic form or doing these genres that are really specific in graphic, like semi-autobiographical. I was reminded of that when looking at the new Art Spiegelman American Masters on PBS. He talks about how that semi-autobiographical became a real comics subgenre. There are a lot of folks who are wanting to get into that and maybe they're more writerly and they want to get into graphic. They're looking at graphic differently. Certainly a lot more literary folks are looking at graphic differently now and maybe wanting to try their hand. So I don't know. I'm sure old timers look at today and go, well, you really can't go back. You can't go back to what it was like. You can't go back to the past. But going forward, there are so many new voices who are out there feeling free to put their stuff out there independently, come what may. That right there, I mean, you have such a tremendous variety now and so many different ways in that I would hope that they would be proud of us.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that the only complaint I've heard, and it's usually from my own mouth, is where's the story? Tell me a story. Show me a story, kid. Like a lot of comics seem to be very ethereal and like just like navel gazing, corduroy paisley. What just happened? So I found the email that Walt wrote me. So I had sent him like Chest Face and COVID Cop and Red Hook and a bunch of Billy Dogma comics that I've done recently.
With an apology, I assume.
Just to show him what happened.
Because I know you enough to know that you would send it with like, hey, well, here are the latest things I did. Sorry. Sorry? It sounds like this.
So he wrote back to me, many thanks for the comics, pal. Very cool. And one of the things I like best about them and about all your work is that you really found your own way into the field. Love it.
Great. I expect nothing less from him.
Right? So, I found my own way into the field.
All right, James, it's traditional on our show that whenever we're done with an interview with someone, we flush the toilet. You won't hear it on the video, but you will hear it on the podcast. So traditionally. I work in a toilet. I mean, I work in a bathroom. I don't work in a toilet. Anyway, there you go. There it goes. Before we go, I do want to mention number one, we lost two comic book creators over the last week. We didn't get a chance to talk about them last week with Don Simpson, but Mark Zingarelli, who is an illustrator here based in Pittsburgh, passed away last week. Inker Rob Stull, who worked with Kari Randolph, a friend of ours, and I think he did Firestorm with Jamal Igle. I never knew Rob, but everyone that I know knows him or knew him, and we're very devastated by his loss. So we want to say, give our regards to their families and friends. Dean, you were going to say something?
Yeah, thanks for that. So I never met Mark Zingarelli, but I feel like he did a graphic novel with Joyce Brabner, a more recent project like that. And Joyce was always telling me about him and the project. I think she might even sent me the book. And I did get to meet Rob Stoll, I believe, at a Baltimore Comic-Con. I don't know if you had been, every year it's always a mixed bag of who comes, sits at my table. You might not have been there that year. And he was so cool. And I got to talk to him and sit at a bar with him for a little while and discuss, I don't remember now what it was, but I remember walking away feeling like this is a good guy, Yeah. And when he passed away, suddenly it was like, even his good friends didn't know. Was it cancer?
Yeah.
Like that he'd been dealing with cancer, and I guess he just quietly removed himself from the scene and lived his last days with his family, So it's sad, but big ups to Mark Zingarelli and Rob Stoll. So.
And before I go, I do want to mention that our friend Afua Richardson is currently dealing with her own battles. I'm going to put the GoFundMe for her medical expenses in our show notes. So if you have the ability to contribute, please do. I've known her before she was a comic book artist. She was dating my friend Chuck, and she used to come into Jim Hanley's universe, and we would just sit and talk and laugh. And now she is who she is. And it doesn't matter to me. She is one of the good ones. Please, if you can contribute, we would appreciate it.
Absolutely. Sending out nothing but good vibes and healing energies to Afua.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, James.
James.
Thank you, guys. This was such a great comics day here in Brooklyn. One day, hitting all the stops. So thanks.
That's right, baby.
That's fine.
All right. Well,
That's for you guys. I love you. Talk to you guys later.
Love you too. Bye-bye.
Oh, thanks.